Cocaine works by blocking the reuptake of dopamine, flooding the synapse with the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. SSRIs work by blocking the reuptake of serotonin. Beta blockers work by blocking norepinephrine receptors in the heart. Nearly every psychiatric medication and most recreational drugs exert their effects by either mimicking, amplifying, or blocking the action of specific neurotransmitters. Understanding these chemical messengers is the molecular foundation of psychology. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter most strongly associated with the brain's reward and motivation systems. When you experience something pleasurable, food, social success, accomplishment, dopamine is released in the nucleus accumbens, reinforcing the behavior that produced it. This is why dopamine is central to addiction. Addictive substances flood the reward circuit with dopamine far beyond normal levels. Dopamine also plays a critical role in motor control. The death of dopamine-producing neurons in the substantia nigra causes the tremors and rigidity of Parkinson's disease. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that helps regulate mood, appetite, sleep, and pain sensitivity. About 90% of the body's serotonin is produced not in the brain, but in the gastrointestinal tract, a fact that has driven intense research into the gut-brain axis. Low serotonin activity has been associated with depression, anxiety, OCD, and eating disorders, which is why selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, are the most prescribed class of antidepressants. They work by preventing the reabsorption of serotonin, leaving more of it available at the synapse. Norepinephrine, also called noradrenaline, serves as both a neurotransmitter in the brain and a hormone in the bloodstream. In the brain, it mediates alertness, attention, and the fight-or-flight arousal response. In the periphery, it raises heart rate and blood pressure during stress. Chronically elevated norepinephrine is associated with PTSD and anxiety disorders. Reduced norepinephrine function contributes to depression and the cognitive fog of chronic fatigue. Many antidepressants target norepinephrine in addition to serotonin. Gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter of the central nervous system. Where glutamate excites neurons, GABA calms them. It is the nervous system's brake pedal. Insufficient GABA activity is associated with anxiety disorders, seizures, and insomnia. Benzodiazepines like diazepam and alcohol both work by enhancing GABA activity, which explains their calming and sedative effects. General anesthetics also work largely through GABA, highlighting how central this neurotransmitter is to neural inhibition. Glutamate is the most abundant excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. It is the gas pedal to GABA's brake. It is essential for learning, memory, and synaptic plasticity. Long-term potentiation, the cellular mechanism of learning, depends on glutamate receptors called NMDA receptors. However, excess glutamate is toxic to neurons, a process called excitotoxicity, which is involved in the neural damage from stroke, traumatic brain injury, and neurodegenerative diseases. Disrupted glutamate signaling is also implicated in schizophrenia. An agonist is a drug or substance that increases the action of a neurotransmitter, either by mimicking it at the receptor, by increasing its release, or by blocking its reuptake and degradation. Morphine is an agonist at opioid receptors. It mimics the brain's natural endorphins to produce analgesia and euphoria. Nicotine is an agonist at acetylcholine receptors. Cocaine is an indirect agonist for dopamine. It does not directly activate dopamine receptors, but prevents dopamine reuptake, flooding the synapse. An antagonist binds to a receptor and blocks it without activating it, thereby preventing the neurotransmitter from exerting its effect. Antipsychotic medications work primarily as dopamine antagonists. They block D2 dopamine receptors, reducing the excess dopamine activity associated with the positive symptoms of schizophrenia, like hallucinations and delusions. Beta blockers are norepinephrine antagonists used to treat hypertension and performance anxiety. Naloxone is an opioid antagonist used to reverse heroin overdose by displacing opioids from their receptors. Acetylcholine was the first neurotransmitter discovered and plays essential roles in both the peripheral and central nervous systems. In the peripheral nervous system, it activates skeletal muscles at the neuromuscular junction. Without acetylcholine, voluntary movement is impossible. In the central nervous system, acetylcholine is critical for memory and learning, particularly in the hippocampus. Alzheimer's disease involves the selective destruction of acetylcholine-producing neurons. Nerve agents like serin and the toxin in botulinum work by disrupting acetylcholine signaling at the neuromuscular junction. Endorphins are the brain's endogenous opioid neurotransmitters. They bind to the same receptors as morphine and heroin to produce analgesia and euphoria, but they are made by the brain itself. Endorphins are released during prolonged exercise, during excitement, and in response to pain, helping to suppress pain signals during stress or injury, an evolved mechanism that allows injured animals to continue fleeing or fighting. The runner's high is attributed to endorphin release. Acupuncture may work partly through endorphin release. Every thought, mood, memory, and movement is mediated by neurotransmitters. Understanding these chemical messengers means understanding the biological substrate of behavior at its most fundamental level. Every major drug of abuse, every psychiatric medication, and many neurological diseases can be explained in terms of specific neurotransmitter systems, which is why this knowledge is the molecular core of biological psychology.